Everyone has their favourite Christmas song, and for many, it's the Pogues and Fairy Tale of New York. Over the years, however, pressure has been put on radio stations to edit out 2 words from the lyrics that are deemed by some to be homophobic and sexist insults. Back in 2007, Radio 1 decided to remove the words as, quote, some members of the audience might find them offensive. Radio 2 has now joined the fold this year. Journalist and author Ella Whelan has been writing about this for Spiked this week, and she joins me now. Good evening, Ella. This debate appears to be perennial. It seems as though every year we have a debate about the Pogues and Kirsty MacColl singing Fairy Tale of New York. And was it the case that... So Radio 1 decided ages ago that they weren't going to play it, but Radio 2 always thought, well, we've got an older demographic, and they're OK with it. Something's changed.
Yeah, various radio stations. The BBC actually went through a period at one point of sort of having internal debates about not just whether, who would play what version or whether they'd give one station licence to play the uncensored version, and it was kind of extremely messy.
Yes.
And I think pretty much now Radio 2 has had to kowtow to the pressure of people. Actually, no, that's not right. I don't think callers have been calling in.
Yes.
There's no evidence to say that people have been ringing in and say, listen, before you hit play on the Pogues button, please will you take out the F word.
Yes.
But I think it's just the kind of climate that we live in now, which is that all these things have to be preempted.
That's a really good point, because, this is still a really popular song, and you don't hear people up in arms with placards complaining about the F word, which is a homophobic slur in some people's views, and the S word, which is a sexist slur, and obviously we're not saying the words because we're before the watershed now. But people don't seem to care, actually. This is just coming from above, isn't it? No,
and it's a hard one to argue about because, it's fair, the use of the F word in that song is very particular.
Yes.
And, of course, there are people who get drunk of Christmas time and will sing that particular word very loudly.
Right.
Because some of them are homophobic, maybe because some of them are, ticked off at the fact that they keep being told they're not allowed to sing it.
Yeah.
But the point of that word is that it doesn't mean a homophobic slur in the context that Shane MacGowan wrote it. And the reason I'm saying it's hard is because you start to sweat and sound like you're being some kind of apologist for
yes.
a homophobic language, but you're not, actually. The time it was written, that word means, the etymology of it means bundle of sticks. And in Ireland, in Hiberno English, it means you lout, you bum, you kind of...
lazy kind of person.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's just the song is between a heterosexual couple. It would be quite weird for her to call him homophobic slur. It just doesn't make sense in any case. And so, there's an important point here, though it is a kind of a drunk Christmas song. Shane MacGowan, many consider him to be a poet, and lots of his lyrics, though he kind of sings them, half-cut and sort of unintelligible, are beautiful, wonderful lyrics. His song Aisling has got incredible lyrics in it. And so, there is a sort of quite important point here, which is that you are technically censoring a song, a poem, someone's, a piece of art, if you want to go that far.
It is a piece of... this isn't like the Venga Boys or Too Unlimited or something. Like, this is something that... It's actually a narrative, isn't it? It's an argument between a couple, and they've become disillusioned with their relationship with each other, and it dramatises that through the song, and part of that is the language that they use. So is this really about people not willing to engage with the artistic choices that people make?
Yeah, well, actually, to his credit, Shane MacGowan, he's come under a lot of pressure about this, but he did at one point give a statement to, I think it was RTE, or there was a kind of a controversy in Ireland as well.
Yes.
And he said, listen, I've written this song that's 2 characters who are they're not angels, I think that's what he said.
Yeah.
They're pretty nasty people who are kind of out on their luck and are drunk and are insulting each other. They're not going to use nice language.
Right,
they're going to use unpleasant language. And, sometimes you have to do that in order to portray a character who's taken it quite seriously. The Pogues Twitter account has since tweeted abuse at people who have defended the song from censorship. I don't think Shane MacGowan's behind the Twitter account.
Okay,
I think it might just be a sort of side guitarist or something who's taken issue with this. But, Shane made the point of, you take the song at its face value. Nick Cave actually wrote a really great one of his Red Hand files, a defence of it, where he said, a song is something that stands on its own and it's imprinted in history, and to meddle with it is to do something kind of truly awful.
Yes.
And I think we do have to take that sort of aspect of artistic censorship seriously, because when you look at the excuses of why Radio 1 and Radio 2 now have banned it, it's not because it's a rude word and it's before the watershed. It's not because, radio doesn't play that kind of stuff. It's because they imagine that young people, I think one of the phrases that the statement used was younger audiences are more sensitive to gender and issues around gender and sexuality. And you just want to scream, but it's not about gender and sexuality. That's not what this song on this word is about.
So is it about a lack of trust in the listeners? Younger listeners, they think, won't be able to interpret this in a sufficient way. They'll just hear the word and be offended for the word's sake. Yeah,
and I think it's a real insult to young people if you imagine that they cannot understand the importance of context.
Yes.
So, frankly, you're an idiot if you're listening to a Christmas song that's, people have sung for, since the 80s, and you imagine that you are the first one in the world to notice that there's a homophobic slur in the middle.
Yeah.
I mean, you've discovered the, hidden meaning of Fairy Tale of New York. I mean, it's ridiculous. No one thinks that. There's just a sort of knee-jerk, I think, Philistine reaction to it. And also, I mean, if you want to go into the kind of, I know I'm sounding now like I'm putting Fairy Tale of New York up on a pedestal of some kind of great, interesting work of art. But actually, the way in which Irish people use the English language is very interesting. Hiberno English, there's lots of stuff that we kind of, words that don't mean the same thing. So if someone says something's deadly, that means it's fantastic.
Right.
Words like, something like a cute whore is someone who isn't a beautiful prostitute, but is someone who's like a clever so-and-so, someone not to be trusted. It often uses curse words, so I can't say a lot of them now because before 8 o'clock. But there's, it's a really rich kind... People have written theses on this. It's a really rich language.
And it's part of these characters.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah, and, even if, I think, because you can also feel too apologetic, even if it was a homophobic slur, because there is, Money for Nothing by the Dire Straits and stuff like that most definitely uses that F word in a derogatory way. I think we should also challenge the idea that people are so fragile that simply hearing that word played on a radio station would send them into some kind of apoplex.
Well, that's a good example, isn't it? So, for instance, in a lot of Eminem's songs, he does use that word in an explicitly anti-gay or perceived to be anti-gay way. I mean, you could argue that he's playing a character as well. There's that as well. But the radio stations haven't, by and large, played those songs, or they've always beeped those words out. Similarly, with rap and gangster rap, you'll have the N-word beeped out or just not played at all. So is there a case to be made on the BBC's defence to sort of say, well, look, they don't play those other songs, so isn't the word sufficient just from those perspectives?
I think if it was the case that it was just an issue of kind of cleaning up and making everything sort of uniform, then I'd have less of a case.
Okay.
But the fact is that this has been, by the BBC's own statement, the idea is that young people are more enlightened than those of us who are over the hill.
I see.
And so then, we have to, in order to kind of satisfy their hurt feelings or to protect them from having hurt feelings, we have to neuter certain words. That's the thing that annoys me.
Yeah.
Not the bleeping out. I'm not so in love with the F word or the S word that it ruins the whole song without me. I mean, Kirsty MacColl started singing, actually, while she was still alive, started singing "You Blackguard" or "You Haggard" or something. They changed it themselves.
Yes.
Whatever. But it's the idea that you have to censor in order to make things acceptable in 2022 that is the most annoying.
I mean, this is a broader problem with the arts generally, isn't it? I mean, that you had an edition of Huckleberry Finn was republished without the racial epithets in that book. But, of course, once you take the racial epithets out, the book loses its meaning because it's a satire against the racists, right?
Well, that's in a completely different league to taking the F word out of Fairy Tale of New York, because that's completely changing the meaning of an extremely important anti-racist book.
Yes. I suppose, the principle is similar.
Well, yeah, but it's this kind of idea that, that words have no relationship to their context. And that's a very dangerous thing, because it means that we're completely simplifying the English language, which, there are even, if you want to kind of get into the ins and outs of it, there are so many words that mean so many different things. I mean, it's fascinating. There's reasons why people study it for their whole lives.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly rich language that it cannot be simplified down into narrow political meanings in a certain kind of social or political time frame.
I mean, you say that this is very patronising to young people, particularly, with Radio 1 banning it, but Radio 2 not for a long time. But don't they have a case insofar as a lot of young people do and have complained about certain, and they do have knee-jerk reactions sometimes to certain words, irrespective of context. Is it a generational thing?
Well, I think yes and no. It tends to be that the people who pipe up about this kind of stuff are younger. And I would argue stupider, and there's a level here where you kind of have to say young people need to be educated about what's right and what's wrong in order to form their own opinions properly as adults, and they have to be challenged. There's this kind of ridiculous idea that some 19-year-old tweets something and we all have to be like, yeah, absolutely, of course. You think, oh my God, this kind of stuff I came out with when I was 19. I'm glad no one treated me like that.
Yeah.
But then, on the other level, actually, most young people are not like that. Yeah. Most young people are very robust. Most young people, if they're politically active, they're able to tussle with these kind of ideas and not be frightened of a word. And so I think actually the BBC is doing young people pretty dirty.
Well, Ella Whelan, thanks very much for joining us tonight.